Hey everybody, what is up? Gary Simon here. So today we've got a great one for you. I'm going to show you how to build and launch and deploy a modern portfolio. And this is applicable to whether or not if you're a designer or a developer, like a front-end developer or a back-end developer. And so let me show you exactly what we're going to be creating today. And this is the design that I created, and we're going to walk through a lot of the design considerations when you're setting up a portfolio. And also, I'm going to show you how to use Tailwind CSS to make this a reality in the browser. We can also see it is fully responsive. And so we've got, a little bit more of the lengthy side of the tutorial, but it's going to be very worth it if you're interested in the process of creating a really effective portfolio that will help you land jobs, essentially, or clients if you're a freelancer. So Tailwind CSS, if you're not aware, it's a utility-first CSS framework that allows you to relatively quickly just kind of take a lot of the CSS, the manual CSS work that is required to bring something like this to the browser and other devices, and just focus on classes essentially. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that as well. And then finally, I'm also going to show you how to deploy it using Hostinger.com with automatic Git deployment. Now, Hostinger, which is the sponsor of this video, make sure to click on the very top link here in the YouTube description to get access to Hostinger and the plans that we're going to create in order to deploy this process, and use the coupon code DesignCourse for a 10% off discount. So Hostinger, they've sponsored a number of my videos previously. They're a great web host with many different features. As you can see, they're all listed here. For this particular project, I'm going to use the premium shared hosting plan. So if we select this, you'll see that you have a lot of different options to save a lot of money depending on the span, the duration that you want to work with, and a lot of different payment methods. And of course, outside of the Black Friday promotion deal that we saw on the homepage here, also make sure to apply this DesignCourse coupon code for 10% off. And so I'm going to be showing you how to launch this and deploy this project that we create near the end of the video. And I'm going to use link a timestamp as well to where you can just jump right to that deployment process if you wish. And what's really cool, it's automatic Git deployment, which means every time you make a change to your website and you push that change to GitHub, it will automatically update and just basically download those updates from GitHub and automatically push it to your website live. So it's a very seamless and just very simple process, and I'm going to show you how to walk through all of that. So let's stop talking and let's get started. All right, so we're going to spend some time talking about this design here, which is something that I threw together and what I believe constitutes an effective portfolio either for a designer or a developer of some sort. And it has, at a bare minimum, I would say 4 different sections. And so I'm going to go through each of these sections, and I'm going to talk a little bit about do's and don'ts essentially. Now, if you're curious about what this app is, it's Figma. And Figma is basically the most popular UI UX design tool. And the idea is you design your projects first in something like Figma. There's other competitors like Adobe Experience Design, otherwise known as Adobe XD, or Sketch. And those are the primary 3, although there are other ones that you can choose from as well. And the idea behind it is you first design what your website should look like in a browser or device or whatever. And then you get to the coding portion. Now, a lot of developers just like to hop right into the code portion without first designing it, but that's not the way to go. It's very difficult to iterate and make changes to your layout as you're coding because that requires changes to the code sometimes. So here, we're able to rapidly make changes easily without having to deal with code. And also, if you're dealing with a client or an employer who has a final say, like a stakeholder as they're called, then it's a lot easier to make those changes here. And they're also able to create prototypes. I didn't do any prototyping here, but it allows you to kind of create interactivity, page transitions between different pages just to show what it will look like and how the app or the website will behave on actual devices. All right, so let's get started here with the first one. We can see we have 3 different layouts here. This is for like a desktop, this is for like a iPad or a tablet, and then this here is for a phone. So it's important if you're dealing with another developer, the front-end developer, which is the person who's responsible for making this thing a reality in the browser through HTML, CSS, and sometimes JavaScript. It's important that they understand how you want this layout to change based on the available width, or based on the device that it's being viewed upon. So outside of that, all the content is essentially the same. We're just laying it out differently. So the very first section of a portfolio, I would say that is so important, it is the most important section in my opinion, is what's called the hero section, and that's right here underneath this. Now, before we get to that, I will talk a little bit about your navigation. Typically, it's going to be your name up here in the upper left. Branding across all websites and apps and stuff, for the most part, is typically found in the upper left. That's where people are trained to look, like for the company name. And so if it's your personal name, your personal brand, put your name up there, right up there, all right? Upper left, don't try to be too unique, especially if you're new. And then your navigation. Your navigation should consist of those links to the 4, or at least the 4 sections that I say are an absolute, and that is a way to get back to the home. And that's pretty much, the home button is pretty much the button you want on every website. They study it in terms of UX. People want to be able to get back to the home section or the home page. And then also your work. That's the number one thing that a potential employer or somebody who's looking to hire a freelancer wants to see. They want to know what you're capable of. And so definitely include, you can word that differently, like my portfolio or something like that, but definitely showcase your work. Also, clients, that's another thing, kind of works with your portfolio and who you've worked for. You can have a client section and work that in just within the portfolio section. But if you have some notable clients, you may want to make your own page specifically for that. And then typically, you could put it in an About Me section as well. I chose not to put it here, but providing at least the bare minimum of information about yourself, such as location, your name, obviously, your age. These are all very important, obviously. And then also a way to either hire, it says hire me, or contact me. So whatever you deem to be the most important element that you want them to see, use what's called visual hierarchy in terms of UI design to emphasize that. So we really emphasize this hire me button. Outside of that, we have that hero section I was talking about, and this is the area in which you see, you create the first impression, really. If you have a bad designed hero section, that's going to be an immediate turn off, especially for somebody who's looking for a designer. If you can't design your own hero section well, it's not worth looking at anything else, is what they're probably going to think. A hero section consists usually of at least 3 different items. That is the headline, very important because it's usually going to be the first thing people see because it's large and it demands attention. I'm also a big advocate of using ad copy that makes sense. Marketing 101 when it comes to ad copy or copywriting is you want to emphasize benefits over features for your headline. So building beautiful web experiences is definitely better than saying something like software developer, or I'm a web designer, or my name is Gary Simon. A lot of people use or misuse the headline when it could be much more effective. So I would definitely research effective ad copy for determining your headline. So that's the first one that you'll see on a hero section. Another one is going to be a call to action of some sort. I've seen people on their portfolios leave this section out. You definitely want to have a call to action, which is essentially an action that you want the visitor to take. And that could be in the form of a button, as it is here, or it could be in the form of a form that somebody fills out, or it could be just a scroll indicator icon that's animating up and down, letting them know you want them to scroll down the page to learn more. And then another one is going to be an illustration, a photograph in this case, some sort of texture that will really help fill up the space that you have available, especially for a large desktop, and give it context. So You don't have to put a picture of yourself. A lot of people do. You don't have to. You can have like an illustration of some sort. In this case, clearly this guy is not me. But one thing I've seen, people who do use photographs of themselves, which makes perfect sense. It's your personal portfolio. Sometimes they'll use pictures of themselves that look like it was shot from an iPhone 4, and it's all pixelated and it's not good lighting. Listen, if you're serious about this, invest a little bit of money or if you have a friend with a good camera and maybe some lighting, invest in yourself so that you can create a really professional photograph. It's going to go a long way, more than what you probably think. Have a professional and well-designed site. And if you're going to use a picture of yourself, make sure it's not all blurry and just kind of thrown on there without thought. All right, so next up, I did decide to include this. This, of course, is entirely optional. I kind of wanted to show interactivity when we get to the front-end development portion. So this is a dot navigation, which you'll see how that animates when we get into the actual project. You probably already saw it at the beginning of the video. So my work. All right, so my work in this section, I designed it fairly simply. I had just a little, paragraph here, a couple sentences, or rather just one sentence rather. And then we have the project thumbnails, based on what you've done. Now this is an area I've seen so many aspiring designers screw up on their portfolios because their thumbnails don't look very good. And here's what they, like a beginner will typically do. They'll have a web design or some project they created, and they take a screenshot of it, and that's it. There's a screenshot. There's no perspective. There's nothing on this, like no thought really given. I've done a video about this. I'll try to remember to link that in YouTube description about how to create truly effective thumbnails. These are all just pulled from a Figma plugin called Unsplash, and they're actually really solid and professional. It's a picture, of somebody using the app on their phone. That's one way that you can approach it. It's not the only way though, and I discussed that in that video, which you can watch on your own time if you wish. And obviously when these are clicked upon, you could just expand them. Like if you're just showing a logo is typically a logo, but ideally you'd link it to a new page where it's kind of a case study. You outline the challenges, the problems that you help solve. You link to the actual live website, hopefully. And that's another thing. If you can, try to get projects that are live on the web for real clients. I see a lot of people using projects that they created from tutorials, COVID-19 trackers. That's been a popular thing. Calculators. I mean, honestly, do everything in your power. Understand if you're new, you may not have all this, all these projects. Do everything in your power to get a project and multiple projects that are live, that people can visit on a website URL. That will really help sell you as a professional, much more than just showcasing what are, projects that were probably created from tutorials. Next up after that, client section. Again, notice how I'm reusing patterns in terms of UI design. If you're kind of new to this, and maybe you're a developer who's watching this video because they want to learn how to make a portfolio, you have to understand UI design fundamentals and principles. That's why I suggest going to DesignCourse.com and signing up for my course. But what are those principles? I'll just a real quick rundown. Color and contrast, understanding how to apply and use those effectively, especially when it comes to type. There's also white space, and that's the empty space in the areas of your design. There's alignment to make sure things align up properly. There's visual hierarchy, which is really directing the eye by using those other UI design principles to emphasize based on priority certain areas. So for instance, if I took this down maybe to 40 pixels, now you're not really sure where I should be looking first, right? So scale is one way that you can emphasize visual hierarchy. You can use color as well, white space and alignment and all of those things. But notice how while this is a simple design, there's not a lot of complex things happening. It's all designed consistently. All those fundamentals have been applied consistently throughout. So I have a headline here. All right, it's designed exactly the same here. I'll see beginners sometimes center some headlines while the other ones aren't. So whatever you choose to do, whichever aesthetic you choose to use, stick with it consistently. That also applies to a color scheme. I'm using the same colors all throughout here. Same font sizes where it makes sense to, etc., etc. So of course, this This is just one way that we could lay out potentially a client section just to show different clients. And then here's a hire me form. Sometimes I see people get the forms wrong a lot in a multitude of ways. The ones that come to mind the most is they're not leaving an actual form. They'll only put their email address and that's it. You have to remember, if you have a client who is maybe on a mobile phone without an email client set up or something like that, or they're using somebody else's device, they may not have access to an email client to quickly email you. So you always want to have an actual form on the website that they can use. Now, if you do have a form, which I suggest you do, you should definitely make sure you research good form design practices. I see a lot of people making inaccessible designs for their forms all the time. For instance, there might not be enough contrast around the text area. Sometimes people will just put a simple border underline, and then that confuses people. They're not sure where to click in order to enter the information. Sometimes they will use placeholder values instead of actual labels right here. If you're going to use a placeholder value for the label, then make sure it's a floating label so that once a person clicks inside of it, that label doesn't go completely hidden, and that can cause issues with people who might forget what they're supposed to be typing in that given field. And then the final note I'll make about this is give other ways to contact you. Some people, they might not want to use a form to contact you. Maybe they want a phone. Maybe they want an email, maybe Skype or Twitter. So put all those things, make yourself as available as possible. Now, some people say, I don't want to put an actual email address because I don't want spam. Listen, deal with the spam. There's anti-spam software that you can get, and you can register an email specifically for this purpose of receiving contact here, so that way you don't have to clutter up your main email. Just make it as easy as possible for people to contact you at any time for the most part. And that is it for what I would call essential. Now, as you can see here, I have these other variations that I created. But in terms of responsive design, it's all just about intelligently understanding how to change the layout to adapt to the little amount of space that you have, increasingly so when you get to smaller devices. So here between desktop and tablet, you can see it looks mostly the same. Things are scaled down, which is typical. But for the most part, it's pretty much the same. Instead of having 3 by 3 right here for the columns, we have 2 by 2. And then we have an odd number here because we have 9 of them. I decided to stretch this one all the way across just to fill up the layout. This right here, we collapse from a 2-column layout where we have the identity or the logo on one column and then the information on the right. Here we could just collapse it all and center it. And we'll do all of this, by the way, in the front-end development portion with Tailwind CSS. And then, of course, we just continue on. And for instance, the thumbnails would just be one column, essentially, with having just one thumbnail on their own row, essentially. And so, as you can see here, we collapse this down here. We're going to do that. And everything else is the same, essentially, after this thumbnail portion. Everything will be exactly the same as this. That's why I didn't, complete it all the way down. And that's essentially it. If you're really interested though in, learning effective UI UX design, it's not an easy process. That's why I've created DesignCourse.com. Definitely go there to check that out. If it's not released yet at the time you're watching this, enter your email there. And otherwise, yeah, it will be available on January 4th of 2022. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get to the front-end development process. All right, so now I'm here in the code editor, and this is Visual Studio Code, and it is basically the de facto most popular code editor for front-end developers doing this sort of work, working with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. And as we can see here, and by the way, it's free, so if you don't have it yet, go, just type in Visual Studio Code. You'll be able to download it and install it. Now right here is where the files are listed out. As we can see, we have personal portfolio. It's a folder and it's empty. Files are usually listed out here, so we can see that it is indeed an empty folder. So to get to that point, you can open folder and then just create a new folder and then just hop into there and then open it up, and your project will look like this. So Before we begin, we want to make sure that we have what's called a Node Package Manager installed. Short for that is called NPM, the acronym. Node.js.org. If you don't know if you have it installed, you can type npm-v in the terminal, which I'll show you in a second. But yeah, you want to go ahead and click on this, and you would download it for either Windows, Mac OS. I think they have it for other operating systems as well. So you definitely need that in order to follow along. I'll go ahead and close that. And let's go ahead and open up the terminal. So view terminal. And what I'll do is go ahead and we're going to, like I said, if you type npm-v, you can see mine's pretty outdated. But what we want is access to npx, which is installed with the Node Package Manager by default. And what we want to do is we're going to head on over real quick to the installation section of TailwindCSS. And Tailwind here, I'm going to elaborate a little bit further on this just now. For those of you who are relatively new to this sort of thing. When you're building out a website, you're always just dealing with HTML and CSS and sometimes JavaScript. And if you don't want to write out just straight up HTML, CSS without some sort of framework, you can do that completely fine. But Tailwind CSS is a framework that allows you to build these websites in a different manner than if you were to do it just custom. And it has a bunch of utility classes, as they're called. And it's essentially taking care of all the work within your HTML document rather than doing a bunch of custom work in your CSS document, if that makes sense. So I definitely recommend, if you don't know HTML and CSS to this point, you should definitely learn the basics of HTML and CSS before trying to venture out into something like Tailwind CSS. All right, so installation, there's a variety of ways. Next.js, Vue, if you have a Vue project, Laravel, Gapsy, Nuxt, React, etc. We're going to use the process where we used npx to install it. And as you can see, we have this command right here. Make it larger so we can see it. npx tailwind css init. So that's going to create a configuration file in our empty folder. But before we can do that, you have to make sure that you have the Tailwind CLI, or the command line interface utility, included when you install Tailwind CSS. So we need the Tailwind CSS npm package. So let's go back to our code editor here, wrong one, and we're going to type in npm I Tailwind CSS, and we'll put -g for global. Now we'll install it everywhere. We only have to do it one time for our particular machine. And there we go. It is now installed. Now at that point, we can then run that command that I highlighted. Tailwind, or npx tailwind css init. So let's just paste that in and we'll see what happens. All right, so now we can see it created this Tailwind configuration file. Now, if you go back to the Tailwind docs and you type in configuration or search bar, you will find this lengthy page right here. It's all about learning how to customize your Tailwind CSS or Tailwind, installation essentially. This allows you to, just get the general scaffolding, your colors, right? Your color scheme, any sizing, all of it's pretty much optional. So things that you don't, specify in the actual config file, they will be, it'll just revert back to whatever's default, because they all have default settings. So we are not going to use any plugins because there are plugins that you can use. So we can just go ahead and get rid of that. And we are going to leave dark mode false. You have dark mode and light mode, of course, in UI design these days. We're just going to leave that false. Theme, we are going to want to add a few things. So inside of extend right here, we're going to put in colors. So this is going to be an area. These are just a bunch of objects that are nested within each other, if you know anything about JavaScript essentially. But this is going to be where we can specify just overall colors that Tailwind will then use essentially. So for instance, like our body, My fingers were not in the right spot on my keyboard. So body, what's our body color, right? So we're gonna revert back to our, where is it at? Oh yeah, right here. Our project, it looks black, but it's not. The fill color for this is actually 17171F, all right? And so I can specify that right here. And so you might be wondering, where do you find this information at? You know, how do you know, how do you change the body color is with this? Well, it's in that lengthy configuration documentation. So you can find all the possible settings that you're going to use or would possibly want to use for your project. And so trust me, there is a lot of information here. And really, I wouldn't try to learn all of them just for the sake of learning. Take them one by one based on the needs of your project. If you go to Google and you type in Tailwind, how to configure X, Y, or Z, chances are you're going to find something on the documentation itself or from somebody who asked the same question on a site like Stack Overflow. So there's a lot that we can specify and talk about here, but we're going to keep this pretty simple. So I have a number of other colors that I want to specify, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste these in. And as you can see, we have selected text. So like if we highlight text on the web page, what will that selected text background color look like? It's this color code. All of these different colors here, these are all available. I'm going to make this project available so you can see the code source, and that'll be a link in the YouTube description. Outside of that, the only other thing that we want to specify here, still within the theme section, is going to be the font family. So we're going to put a comma after the colors object there, and we're going to put in font family because we do have a specific font we want to use. That's going to be called Poppins, and we put in here Poppins for the actual font name, and then we're going to put in sans serif. It is a sans serif font, so if for whatever reason a person's internet connection goes kaput and it doesn't download the font, it'll just revert to a sans serif font. So let's go ahead and save that, and that's all we're going to need for this particular configuration file. We will not have to adjust it again. Next up, for getting everything installed, we want to get our index.html created. So we're just going to create a new file, and then I'm going to hit exclamation point, enter, and that will get us here just with a quick starter template for our HTML document. So for me, what I'm going to put in just for a title is just personal portfolio. Of course, you would want to use something much more better than that. In fact, let's talk about that. Google, of course, you should always try to strive to get traffic from Google, and especially if you have like a local business, you can put your keywords there, like Gary Simon dash web developer in Cleveland, Ohio, or something like that, or UI UX designer. You want to put those things in the title. Outside of that, what we also want to do is we want to import that Poppins font, because that's the font that's used in our Figma project when I created the design rather. So what we want to do is go to fonts.google.com, and we know that it's a Google font, so we're going to type in Poppins. We click here, we choose all the weights that we want. I forget what all three of the weights I have already saved, but I'm just going to choose, typically you don't want any more than 3 font weights, because every weight that you added ends up adding more load times, more download. So once you have them all selected, which actually it's the weight 400, 600, and 700. So these aren't actually correct. So 400, we'll find 600 right here, and then 700. And essentially what you want to do is copy this code right here. If you use import, you can use this, but it's not recommended usually, but you can actually import it inside of another CSS file if you wish to go that route. But I'm just going to copy what I have on the side here on my reference monitor, this right here. So yours should basically look like this code up to this point. Now, before we import those, we're also going to link another style sheet that doesn't yet exist in our project called TailwindCSS. All right, so we're going to create an index.css first though. Now index.css is where we're going to write all of our custom CSS, and trust me, there's not many rule sets because the whole point of Tailwind is to avoid having to write custom CSS. But you'll find in most projects you're still going to have some things that have to be custom because there's not a utility class for everything. So when we write in here our code, we are going to have a script that runs, and we have to create that package.json file in a second to run that script. But it's going to take everything we write here and it's going to transform it into a tailwind.css file, which will include Tailwind itself along with anything we write here custom. So it's going to be looking for tailwind.css, but we're going to be writing our CSS here in index.css. So now that we have that ready, we can go ahead and create the next step, and we could do this through the command line as well. We can type in npm init-y, and that means yes, just answer yes to all the default questions or whatever. If you don't put that flag there, it's going to ask you what are the keywords and what's the name and all that. So now in our package.json file, we're going to create our custom script, and we're going to call it build. All right. Now inside build, we're going to specify the following npx command. That is going to be Tailwind CSS. So this is just like specifying this following command here down in the command line, but instead it's going to run this like every time we save our files here, and you'll see how in a second. So we're going to put -i for input / index.css, and then -o for output to tailwind.css. All right, and then we're going to add the flag -w right there. All right, so we're almost ready, and we're going to make sure everything's working and everything's connected up here in a second. So what we'll do here is we're going to go back to our index.html. We are going to first make sure we're going to do extensions. Make sure that you have the live server plugin installed. So just type in live server. Obviously it's already installed for me. I've been using it for a long time. Once you have that installed, we can then right click on index.html and open with live server right here. So that's going to open up this blank page right here. Now the way we know if things are working here correctly, we need to first run our script here. But before we do that, we're going to make a change really quickly to index.css. We're just going to say body. We're going to remove this, of course, but we're just testing. Body, we're just going to say background color blue. So it's going to change from white to blue if this works correctly. And then we're going to run this command, and it's going to be npm run build. All right, which will mean it's going to run this by default. So let's try that out. npm run and build. And notice it ran the command here. And notice it created that tailwind.css file. We click it. As you can see, it has our color there. And because index.html is looking for tailwind.css, it should make our page blue. There it is. So now we know it's working. Almost done with the setup. We have to go back to our index.css and we have to import a couple of things that are specific to Tailwind. So if we go back to installation, we're going to take this right here, @Tailwind base, @Tailwind components and utilities. All right, that's going to import everything that we need, or it's essentially going to import Tailwind itself. So when we save this, notice this is going to run again. It's going to say done, and it's going to take a little bit longer because these things, 6 seconds, 6.1 seconds or so. Now if we click here, and as you can see, it's a very long file that includes a Tailwind along with anything that you created that was custom. Now if we go back, it's still going to be blue, so we know that our CSS is working as well. So every time we make a change to these files, the live reload refreshes the server or the browser for us automatically, which is very handy. All right, so now that we have it all set up, we can go back to body. We'll remove that tag right there, and now we can start with the bulk of the tutorial, which is going to be creating and getting our site ready, working here specifically, primarily in index.html. Okay, so the first thing we want to get started with when it comes to writing your HTML markup, as you should hopefully already know, we're going to get started with what starts at the top of the page, which is the header or the navigation, the nav bar, whatever you want to call it. So of course that consists of the logo. In this case, it's just a type-based logo, so we don't need to import an image like an SVG or anything. And then over here we have a navigation, very standard navigation that we're all going to style up, try to get it looking as close as possible to this section, minding the white space all around, the overall width, and of course that'll be flexible depending on the size of the browser and if it's maximized and given the resolution and all the other stuff. So let's keep this in mind. This is kind of what we're aiming for, and this is the HTML markup that we have to create for, and then we'll start looking at all the many utility classes to make this stuff possible, in terms of trying to present it as close as this as possible to this. And initially we will refer back to the documentation a lot, just so I can get you in the habit, especially if you've never used Tailwind before. And that way you're going to learn how to, when you go on your own, you'll be able to look up, based on the documentation, what you need to use, which classes do you have to use to make this thing not only look like it does here, but also here, and make it responsive essentially. Okay, so let's get us started. First tag we're going to use for HTML is going to be header. And by the way, you can use Emmet abbreviation, so I'm not going to sit here typing all these little brackets and stuff as you see here. Let me make this a little bit larger, and we can also close this. And that way, when we type tags like maybe like a link, we just hit A and it gets the boilerplate out of the way. I do have an Emmet crash course you can look up on my YouTube channel search as well. All right, so we're going to have a header. We're going to have a container inside of that header, and it's going to be based on a div element. So we're just going to call this container by default. So the way you specify div with a class is just to put period and then the class name, and it gives you that initial markup ready to go right there. All right, so we have these two nested inside of each other so far. And then we're going to have inside of there, we'll have the logo. All right, so typically you'd make this a link. By default, I had a person basically create all of this this markup for me because I didn't have enough time. But we're just going to use a div element for this for now. So we're going to say class text hyphen large, and we're going to put Jonathan Doe, or just Doe. In fact, you know what? I want to take this class off first because I sort of want to just show what everything looks like without applying Tailwind classes and stuff like that. We just want to get the markup done here first. And then after this, we have the navigation that's seated to the right, at least on desktop. So what we'll do there is we're going to put in another class, or just a div rather, and we're going to have our links inside of there. So our nav links will just have a href. This one will just go to the top. It'll go nowhere. This will be home. And then let's replicate this a few times. Shift Alt and the down arrow key 4 times because that's how many links we have. We'll put in on this one my work. On this one we're going to put clients, and then this one will be hire me. Now, because hire me is in a button format, we can take advantage of the button HTML element. So we're going to put button here. Might have to put a space there. There we go. So in our button here, we'll close that up. And of course, this is going to have classes as well, and this will have some classes, or this top one at least. Now, notice on our design, we have this one. This is the active link, and there's different ways to show the active or currently active page. You can underline it, you can add an icon, etc., etc. I'm choosing just to change the color. We have to find a way to denote that, so we're going to put in a class of text selected hyphen text. So it's text and it's selected text right there. These are going to go to different areas of the page. So we're going to put work, clients, and hire. So it's essentially a one-page website there's not separate HTML documents or anything for each of these 4 pages. It's all going to be on the same page, and we're going to make it smooth scroll to each one of those sections. All right, so if we save this and we look at our situation here, this is what we have. This is what things look like without HTML or CSS that's applied. All right, so before we start working on the HTML for this section and making it look like in Figma, we are going to work with the body element first. So what I mean by that is this is the very first tag in terms of what's rendered on the browser. So in body here, we can start applying some of our first Tailwind utility classes. So the first one we're going to add, so we do class equals, and this is where all of your utility classes go. They go in the class attribute here in HTML. And we're going to put in bg-body. All right, so if we save that, look, it is the color of our design. How did it know to use that color? Well, if you recall, back here in our config file, it says body right there. And that's where it grabbed that information from, essentially. Very cool stuff. Now, there's some other things we want to specify, like our default font color. We're going to put text-white. So where am I getting that from? Again, we're going to refer back to our documentation. We're going to search, and we're going to type in text, and we can kind of scroll down here and see if there's a specific area in terms of text color. So text colors, we just hit that, and it's going to give us different areas. Now, sometimes it may be a little bit tricky to find exactly what you're looking for. So if I type in text white, for instance, there we go. Now we found it. So you may have to do a few searches because it's such an elaborate documentation. But as you can see, text white is an option. You could do text transparent, text black, text gray, different shades of gray, different shades of red. All these are at your disposal, essentially. All right, text white. We're also going to specify font poppins right here. And again, it's grabbing this information where he specified poppins. All right. And if we save that, it might be hard to tell if it's actually poppins by looking at it, but I can tell because I've been working with poppins for a long time. I also have a browser extension here on Chrome called WhatFont. You click on it and you hover over it, and it says poppins because I'm hovering over that. So if you ever want to know what type or what font something is, use WhatFont. It's a free extension. All right, so let's go back. All right, just about one more. Now we're going to have some padding here around the entire body element, which is essentially the body element consumes this entire area. So we want to have white space because if you look over here at our design, coming back here real quick, you'll see there's white space all around it, right? So we're going to put padding. Now, if you don't know what padding is, hopefully you do, because if you're at this point, you know basic CSS rather. So padding is the white space on the inside of an element. So in this case, on the inside of the body element, margins on the outside. That's white space applied there. So we could put padding 12, or we can also put padding left or PL, padding right, PR, top, PT, and then bottom. We want padding bottom. So we only want to have padding at the bottom with the size of 12. So what exactly does a size of 12 even mean? Again, we're going to go back here. We're going to type in, sorry about that, padding, and you could see P, like if you want to add padding on all 4 corners, you just put P hyphen and then the amount. And then this right here essentially tells you how much that's going to be. 5 rem units is 20. If you put 80, it's going to be 20 rem units. It's going to be really large. So then it's going to show you exactly a lot more about padding. Same thing essentially with margin, except it's just affecting on the outside of containers rather than the inside right here. All right, great stuff. Let's continue on. All right, so for our header, we're going to put padding, because right now if we look at the project, there's hardly any white space, right? So what we want to do is we're going to add a class of padding Y, and we'll put 6. So let's see what that does. Notice how it pushed it down. Now, by the way, I am zoomed up to 200%. This is what it looks like at 100% on a 4K res monitor at this point in time. So that's good right here. That's what we want. Let's also make our text larger for the Jonathan Doe because it's pretty small as it is. So we're going to put text hyphen LG, which is short for large. So if I go to here, it's going to make it slightly larger. So if I hit Control-Shift-I or F12 to get our dev console up here, and we click this little icon to select an element, it's going to tell us font size 18. So that's large. This here is font size, if I click it, it's 16. So it's actually not that much larger anyhow. So if we go back here and we type in text size or font size or something like that, right here, we'll see we have text extra small, so it's only 0.75 rem. It also specifies a line height for you. Large is 1.125 rem, which is 18 pixels. If you want it to be larger, just look at the size over here. So 5XL is actually 3 rem units, etc., etc., etc. All right. So hopefully it's starting to click with you to understand that you just look at the docs based on what you need and search what you need. All right, so now we're going to add a couple more things. Notice we have a header class with a div of container. So we're going to set a few properties here. Flex. If you understand CSS, maybe you've heard of Flexbox before. We want to make this a Flexbox container because we have two elements. We have the actual logo and we have the navigation here. And we want to create those, at least on desktop, to be 2 columns. So we're making a Flexbox container. If you don't know what Flexbox or what the CSS grid is, pause right now, go do a search on Google, read up. There's videos. I've done videos on it, and just check that out first. And I'm going to mute this so we don't hear that anymore. So what we're going to put is flex. And by the way, go to the documentation, type in flex in our Tailwind CSS to learn about these properties specifically. So now we've made a Flexbox container. We can also specify some Flexbox specific properties, like we want to justify the space between. So that's going to move the logo all the way over here and then the navigation all the way over here. We're also going to put items hyphen center. And let's just see what this does by default, just to see what's happening so far. Okay, so we see we have this container. It's left aligned and it's not yet centered. So we're going to do that next, but it is kind of starting slowly but surely to look like our actual result over here. Not quite, it's kind of just crammed over here, looking a little bit silly, but for now it's getting close and that's what we want. Now, how exactly do we get this whole thing centered up? Well, margin auto in CSS is how you center things, or one of the ways that you can center things centered. It's essentially centering them. So what we can do is put margin on the x-axis, which is horizontal, is going to be hyphen auto. So now it should be moved to the center as it belongs. Awesome, awesome stuff. So there's also a way to specify things in order to make them responsive. All right, so when I say responsive, we'll take this and we'll drag it in. We could see by default, it's doing a pretty good job of making it responsive. Notice how it's collapsing automatically. It's because it has that container class on it right here. But there's also some issues with white space around here at certain areas. It kind of loses it. And so we can also specify certain things, certain CSS properties or Tailwind properties to only be specified at certain widths. All right, and so that's an entire section on responsive design, responsive design right here in Tailwind CSS, and it's going to tell you all about that. So here's the breakpoints. Just another way of saying, just like dragging these in, there's certain breakpoints. You can kind of see even out the Tailwind documentation, there's a breakpoint right here where that sidebar navigation collapses. We don't see it anymore. So I've done several things like that on our layout that we're going to have to consider. And the way you do that is by specifying this right here. I'm going to make this large so we can see it. Notice how it says MD colon and then width 32. Maybe on large, it'll be width 48. And so that way you can specify different properties based on the width of the device, essentially, or the browser in this context. And so this lets you know at small, that's 640 pixels, medium, large, XL, 2XL. Right, so this is for like a really large desktop and up. So the way this works is if you just specify any of these properties like we've been doing without the responsive selector first, then it's going to apply it at the smallest screen size possible. But then if you add this, this will be at anything larger than 640 pixels. This is going to specify something at anything larger than 768 pixels. And what I mean by that 768 pixels, if I hit Control-Shift-I to get our dev console up, when we scale this in, it might be hard to see on my screen, but there's a little area right here on the upper right-hand corner of your browser that shows the width of the browser from here all the way to here. And so we could see at 600, 582, it changes based on the width of the screen. So hopefully that you understand what that means essentially, and you will once you start working with this more so. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, after MX Auto, we're going to put in, well, this is not responsive yet. I want to put a padding on the x-axis of 8. All right, and what that will do is create inner white space around the entire container element of 8. Now we can't really see this, but it's moving things away further than what it was before. Notice it's not touching the sides of the design anymore. So hopefully you can understand that. After this, we're going to say on medium device sizes or browser sizes and up, we're going to say padding X 14. Now, why would we do that? Well, the larger the screen size you have, the more white space you can have. So in this context, inside of container, we're going to specify that white space and that extra white space through padding, and we're going to make it larger from 8 to 14. And then we're also going to put here a large, we're going to say padding X 24. So it gives us even more padding. And then finally, I'm going to put width full right here. So if we save this, it doesn't seem like much has changed, but it's given us good white space all around essentially. Great. All right, now after that, let's continue on. So text large, this is good. Now div class right here, we're going to add a few things as well. We need to get these items away from each other because they're real close. I'm going to zoom this up. And what we're going to do is specify a class of md-flex. So what does that mean? That essentially means that on a small device, it's not going to include this flex container. And on a large device, or a medium and up, it's going to apply a flex container for the two-column approach. And so what that essentially means is by default, on a small device, this navigation will be hidden. So we're going to add the hidden class, which is a part of TailwindCSS. And that's because we're going to hide this because we don't have enough room on a small device to have these 4 links. It'd be too close and smashed into the logo. So what we do is we collapse it into what's called a hamburger menu icon of sorts. And we're going to do that HTML markup in a second. So on medium devices like a tablet and up, we're going to have this right here. So we're going to do also here is going to specify a new property, space -x -12. And what that means is it's going to create, this is the amount of white space between these elements here. And then also we're going to put in items center, another Tailwind class, and we're going to save that. Now, if we look at this, I'll revert back real quickly to the original size. Notice we have our white space now. If we drag this in, it's hidden. Notice it's hidden. Why? Because by default, it's hidden, but then on medium and up, we change it to flex, which ignores the hidden attribute right here. Exactly what we want. Now, when this is hidden, we want to show something else. So we kind of reverse this and show an icon. All right, so now what we'll do is one thing before we get to that, actually, yeah, text selected, that works perfectly. We want to work on this button real quick. So now what we'll do is in our button, we're going to add some more classes. So remember, we want our button to look like this in our design. So if I expand this out, we want this, all right? So it might be actually helpful if I bring this real quickly. Our area, I'm gonna zoom it up. We're gonna put it right there, and then we're gonna take our browser just so you can see what's happening at the same time. Ignore my messy desktop. There we go. So class, the first one is going to be a padding on the X axis, which is to the right and left of this particular button, of 6. Notice how it kind of moved things away. And then we're also going to specify a padding Y, which is on the top of just 2. Then we're also going to specify bg-theme. And again, it's getting that from that config file, which includes our primary theme color. So now we're getting really close to what we want. Text is already white, and we'll also put another utility class that we haven't used that's specific to fonts, which is bold. So we can make it bold. There you go, just by putting font-bold. Now at 100%, this is what it looks like, which at this point is very similar to what we essentially want. For our Jonathan Doe, let's go ahead and make that bold as well. So font bold, save it, and there it is. Awesome, so we've essentially recreated exactly what we want for the navigation up until this point. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. If we drag this in, we see there's nothing here, but we want what is over here in our design. So if I get back our window, let me just pull this out real quickly. We want this. We want this icon right there. All right, so the way you can do this, I'm gonna make this file available as well. Right click, and we can come here to, oh, sorry. I had a brain fart. I thought it was down here, but it's up here. Copy as SVG, so we can get that specifically. And then we're going to put in, right after our closing div tag for the navigation, we're going to put in a div class of MD hidden. So when it gets to the medium size, we hide whatever is inside of this div. And this is this right here. Now, by default, some changes were made to make this fit exactly as we wanted it to in terms of font size. So I'm going to paste this in instead. So it's fill white. It's still the same information for the path and the D attribute, but we've changed it here to the width and height from 26 to 18 and all of that. So if we save it, there it is. All right, so one thing I did not do, just because this would be really extra long tutorials, actually make this function. On click, you would want to attach a class that would then bring back this navigation right here and design it in a mobile-friendly manner, maybe where it kind of slides down from the top or slides in from the left. I've done videos on that in the past, though. There's many other videos, and it would work just fine. All right, so there we go. That is the full navigation. Now I know this has taken quite a long time just to get to this point, but I really want to do a good job of describing exactly what's happening here, just for those who are brand new, because I know some people complain that I talk too much, but I want to be thorough as possible so that people have the best learning experience as possible. So I digress. Let's continue on. So what is the next section? It is that hero section right here. So this hero section consists of a few different things. We have this little navigation, then we have this column, and then this column, and we need to create the markup for all of that. All right, so let's go ahead and switch back here, and let's get started. So this is our header section. We're gonna give ourselves a little bit more lines to work with, and let's get started. So there's gonna be overall a class that's gonna be an overall container that just houses those three elements, or those three blocks: the navigation, the headline, and the call to action, and then the picture. So we're gonna put container here and open that up, and then inside of container we're gonna have a mess of other utility classes for this. we're going to put margin top of 16. So it's going to move this container down by 16 Tailwind units essentially from this, just to give us a good amount of white space so that our text isn't straight up against the navigation, which is never a good thing. We're also going to put and make it a flex container as well, because we have those items inside it that will end up to the left and right of each other. So we're going to put flex and also justify between, which we've already used previously, and then items hyphen center. And then on the margin of the X, we're going to put auto, just like we did with the top one, to center everything that's inside of it. So if I just type some random characters, you can see right now it's kind of off there because we applied some other utility classes that kind of push this in. So we have to apply those as well to this one. And so we're going to put px-8. And rather than just putting all this stuff again, we're going to copy this right here. I believe width full is on there as well. Yeah, so we want to copy these 4 and just paste it right here. So now they should be centered up, and this white space is created by the or the margin top 16 rather. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Next up, we're going to have another container inside of here, and it's going to be a flex box container as well. So we're going to have our div class of flex, and we're going to put in flex wrap, and wrap is another flexbox specific property. And then also on medium, we're going to say flex no wrap. And we'll see how these things sort of work once we add the actual content in and we adjust the size of the browser. After that, we're going to have a specific section just for the left navigation. And that's the dotted navigation that we saw in the design. So we're going to put nav, and we're going to give it a class. And this is going to be displayed as inline block. So it's the same as saying display inline block in CSS, but this is the Tailwind way of doing it. And then we have some other properties that we have to put in here. So on large desktop and up, we're going to say margin right 24. That moves things away from it by 24 Tailwind units essentially on large and up. So it's quite a bit higher. On large, we're also going to put margin right. Oops, sorry. I meant width is going to be 4. It's also going to be fixed, which means when we scroll down on this page, it's going to stay in view the entire time, which is typical for that dot sort of side navigation. We're going to put in here another Tailwind property of left, or utility rather, a left percentage, and then hidden on devices that are smaller all the way up until XL. So this side navigation, we don't have enough room for on smaller devices, so we hide it on everything up until large devices. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so that's that for that portion. Now we have to create the markup here almost for each individual icon, but we're going to have one more element that wraps, a parent element that wraps around it that makes it position absolute. All right, so what we'll do is put in a class of absolute. All of our dot navigations will go in here. Inside of there, we're going to put in left -50. Now this right here is something that we're going to need to specify as a custom CSS class. So this right here is not Tailwind CSS. You'll see in a second what that is. We're also going to put in transform. Tailwind allows you to apply transform animations with their utility, so you don't have to do it custom. So we'll put transform, and then we're going to put -translate -x -1/2 right there. After that, we're going to put space -y -x. This is going to separate things out, the individual dots inside of it. And then margin top is going to be 36. All right, so that pushes it down quite a bit further than from over here. We can't see anything yet because we don't have anything inside of here. I suppose I could do ASDF. But yeah, let's go ahead and just keep on knocking this out. We're almost done with it. I know there's a lot of classes here, and it might be a little bit overbearing at times, but it all makes sense once we actually visualize it in the browser. Next up after this, we're going to have this is going to be the markup for the actual dots. So the first class is going to be nav-dot. Of course, that's not Tailwind. That'll be something we have to do specifically. So nav-dot, this is going to be a selected circle because the first one is selected by default. It's a colored in. Just to show you real quickly, right here, that's the selected one. We're also going to put in, at that point, it's going to be display block. So we put block, a width of 7 and a height of 7, rounded hyphen full. All right, so for basically it's converting that that rectangle to a circle, and border hyphen 4 because they're going to have borders as well. Border hyphen nav and bg hyphen body for the color. So that's how you specify the color. Outside of that, we're going to have an ahref, which I believe, oh, sorry, that's supposed to be class right there. Href here could be just right there for now. And then inside of here, I do want a way when somebody hovers over these for them to see the name of, when they hover over it, you want them to see like where's that going to take them. So we're going to put a span in here of class, and class is going to be bg black, so we're going to make it black behind the text. Padding on the x on the x value is 2. Padding on the y value is 1. We're also going to put in rounded MD. So it's basically rounding the little edges around the type in a medium level. Again, you could type in rounded corners, TailwindCSS, and you'll find what the available ones. Obviously, large and XL and small you can use as well. Margin left is going to be 10, so we're pushing that label away from the little icons. And then opacity is going to be 0 by default because we're only going to show it on hover. But I'm going to leave this off for now just so we can kind of see. And then inside, this is just going to say home. All right, so now we can start to see it's starting to take shape right here. Okay, now before I forget, let's go to our Tailwind, our index.css rather, and let's hide this one. We don't need it. And let's specify some of the properties that were custom that we didn't put in already. So one thing I want to do right off the bat is HTML and body. We're going to put scroll behavior smooth, and we'll only be able to see this effect once we have enough content. And when we click on these, it's going to smoothly scroll down to those areas rather than have a big jarring jump. Also, we're going to have left is at 50. That's the custom class we created. That's what we named it, and we're just going to put left 50%. We're also going to have the same thing for right at 50%. All right, same thing with top. We will eventually use these two, although we haven't yet. And this is top. A few other classes that I'm just going to paste in here for now. In fact, I'm probably going to end up pasting all of them right now because I don't really want to have to deal with custom CSS at this point. So at line 20, I've pasted all this stuff in. All right, so we have -z-1. So that's simply creating a class that we will eventually use for making this. Oops, what am I doing? Let me select all this and just, there we go. So right here, z-index1, or -1 rather, that's what that's for. Secondary title. So this might look a little confusing, but it's a way to extract not properties, but utilities from Tailwind CSS and taking all those properties and values and sticking them inside of this rule set essentially. So we have secondary title. Oops, let's close that out. We're going to get to that in a second. We also, and by the way, the squiggly line, just ignore that. It doesn't mean it's necessarily broken. We don't have to worry about that. Secondary title before, we're going to get to that. Secondary, or section, did I say secondary? Yeah, then section paragraph. We're applying these Tailwind properties. Badge, we're eventually going to have. And really, not too much more. And you'll see kind of how these come into play once we get to specifying them. Here's the nav dot. I'm just kind of getting these all lined up. and then the nav.hover span, that's what's going to make these things kind of show up. So now I'm going to save this. Nothing changes, of course. We're going to go back, and we are going to add the opacity of 0 on here, opacity -0. So, oops, 0 right here. Now when we hover over these, it shows up, and that's essentially what we want. We could also see this is filled in because we specified that class that gives it the color essentially. All right, I know we've done a lot here. Let's copy this, and we're going to simply paste it 3 more times. Now, for some of these, this is not a selected circle, so we're going to get rid of this one. All right, and we could also get rid of the block one right here. We can copy this, paste that. Now we do have to specify this. This is going to be work. This will be clients, and this will be hire. So let's save that. Woo! Okay, I guess I screwed that up. Yeah, I did. I don't know why. I didn't think we needed the block, but we do actually. There we go. Now, if we were to have enough content, we would scroll down, and this would stay. It would stay fixed. It wouldn't hide and scroll away with the rest of the user interface. Okay, so now, oops, let me close that out. Let's go ahead and continue on to the next section. And again, we're still inside this div class over here. So after our nav element, we're going to put in the main hero sections where we have the headline and the call to action. So this is going to be our second column essentially. So we're going to have a class of flex, also flex wrap. Again, another Flexbox specific property. We're also going to have a bunch of other stuff, and instead of typing this all out, we're just going to paste it, and I'll be able to describe it really quickly. So let's put a space there. So we have on this element, on large, we have margin left 20. We're justifying it center, and that's, again, that's Flexbox specific stuff to have this particular area centered. On medium and up, we have justify start, again, Flexbox property. And then we have max width XL. And right here in the documentation, we could see it's utilities for setting the maximum width of an element. So max width XL in the case of what we were using. Of course, margin top 0. And on medium, it's going to be on the margin Y, we're setting it to 36. All right, so that's a fair amount of white space right here. After that, we're going to have our H1 element, which is our headline, and we're going to put in building. We're going to use just a manual line break right there. Beautiful web experiences. All right, so let's save this and see what's happening so far to this point. And we'll come back here. There we go. Very small, as we can see, and so we need to create, make a few adjustments on this specifically. So let's move this over so we can see what's happening as we code this. We'll drag this in. Sorry, I just lost my spot. There we go. Let's drag this in. All right, so we're going to put an H1 here, class. This is going to be a font weight here of bold, so font hyphen bold. Text is going to be 5XL, so that's for the font size. Let's save that. Now we're getting somewhere. On medium and up, it's going to be text hyphen 6XL. So on mobile, it'll be 5XL as shown there, but once we get to medium, it's going to make it 6XL. On large, it will be, let's see, text hyphen 7XL. We're going to text hyphen center this on mobile, but on medium, as we can see, we're going to put in text hyphen left to left align it. So now, if we bring this back, and we see how the font size changes slightly at each breakpoint, and notice how it goes back to text center. Awesome stuff. So now we're getting places, and it's very exciting to me personally. All right, especially because I've been talking and my voice is going, and we're not even close to being finished. But we're going to move things along a little bit quickly because I think you're starting to understand if I want to figure out something to do within Tailwind CSS, all I have to use is documentation, as it is with most of the cases and most technology. So we're also going to have inside of here an area. If I show you in the design, let's go over here where we have this. So we have a button that has this icon, which is SVG, and this type. Now, the amount of HTML markup and classes for this, it is a lot. So I'm just going to simply paste all of that information. And actually, I'm going to copy the right section. There we go. I'm going to paste this next section here. It's a lot just for a button, but it is SVG. A lot of it's SVG though. And this is what it looks like. So if I save this, we'll see our button pretty much very close to exactly what we wanted and had designed already. But let's just real quickly overview the actual content here. So essentially we have a div class container of the entire thing. We're specifying with full, flex, justify centered, and on medium up we're saying justify start, which is in relation to the flex box. Then we have the button itself. We're giving it padding or white space on side of it. Color is BG theme, text white. We're making the font weight bold, margin top 12, flex, item center, and space 3 between the actual SVG element and the type right here. So it's between these two elements. And then we have a div just to hold the SVG information itself, and then the span of my work, and that's the button. All right, so exciting stuff because our design is now working well. If we go back and just see how the button responds, we can see it basically stays exactly the same. It's centered here, and it's essentially what we had designed already. All right, so continuing on, it looks like we do have, this is up a little bit too high. So I have to make sure, go back and make sure we added the right classes here. And sure enough, I put in margin top 37, which is not an actual thing. It's margin top 36. You can't put any random number. You have to make sure that they exist where they need to be. And now it is down exactly where we want it. There we go. Now it's looking pretty solid in my opinion. All right, so the next section of the design is right over here where it says my work. All right, so this is going to get a lot easier now because these sections share a lot of commonalities in the HTML structure along with the classes that apply them. So let's go ahead and get started with the my work section right here. All right, so let's come down, and right after that, oh, I'm wrong. We don't have the image of the person. So if I hit Control B, we'll get back our side panel here. We have to get in the image, and you can get this from the reference files. And I'm gonna open this up off my reference monitor and copy an image folder. So create a new folder called IMG, or just drag it from the reference files. I'm gonna right click and reveal in File Explorer real quickly. And I'm going to hop into that directory and just paste an IMG folder with something called man.png, which is that person that you saw. So then what we'll do is after the second closing div tag, we're going to put in an image source of image/man.png. Alt is just, we'll just put man. And then we're going to have a series of utility classes here as well. So for class, we're going to put these. So we're going to say width is going to be 3/4 of its parent container, margin top 12. On medium, it's going to turn into absolute, medium and up, making it absolute so that it can kind of go behind text if it needs to. And then margin top 6. On medium, margin top will be 0. And all these classes you kind of just create as you're dragging the browser in and out to see how it's responding and where it's sitting and where you want it to sit. So hopefully that makes sense. Also Z1, that's a custom CSS that we defined here in the index.css. So now let's see if our person's there. Yes. Look at that. It's like magic. I love it. Now we can proceed to the very next section. So at this point, because this is kind of a lengthy tutorial already, what I'm going to do is just copy and paste each section and quickly go over the markup. So for the My Work section, this is the markup that we have here. So what we have is a div class container, margin top 64. So we're using a lot of white space between these elements. It's a flex box justify between item center. I'm not going to go through all these other ones because I think you're starting to get the process here. Outside of that, we have just this is all wrapped in a section as well with a width of full. We have our H2 element of My Work. We have a paragraph of section paragraph is here. And then we have our grid. And the CSS grid is a great way to lay out things like thumbnails. It's similar to Flexbox, but it's kind of enhanced in a way. And then here's all of our different images. So if I hit save, we come down, look at that. So now let's do the next section. Of course, that was based on the design here. We have clients. All right, so I'm going to refer to my reference monitor real quickly. And this one kind of has a lot of HTML as well. And so if I go back to our code editor, we're going to come down here and we're going to paste this. I can see it's a lot of repeat. We just have 3 different clients essentially. Again, I definitely encourage you to go through all of these. Again, a lot of these are all classes that you've already been subjected to that are already explained. And a lot of the initial HTML for these is the same in each of these sections. So container MT64, container MT64, section with full. Then we have the same H2 element and the section paragraph. And then here's the custom stuff where we have the clients, and each one of these is a client essentially, and it's pasted just 3 times. So it doesn't look as intimidating as it is, but essentially we're just creating a 2-column layout where on the left we have the logo, and then also on the right we have all the information associated with the fictional client. And then we have this border right here that's applied as well. So all this stuff you can see that's essentially structuring all of this as we need. So here's the SVG for the Apple logo. The client info is right here. All pretty self-explanatory once you go through the code. And then we'll go ahead and hit save and check that out and to see it in action. Notice we also wanted it to collapse on medium and smaller. So if we look over here, here's our client section, and then we'll see it responsively, and it collapses from medium and on down. Awesome, awesome stuff. Now, one final section is going to be the form area. All right, so the form essentially behaves exactly the same, except here it's 2 columns where we have this information. We have enough room to put this additional information, but then on tablet, all of it collapses down. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just do that section, the Hire Me section, real quickly. And we're just about done with the HTML markup. And we're going to put that right here. So again, when it comes to form elements, I keep on clicking that by accident. It comes to form elements, you have your Tailwind specific classes that help you easily style all of that up. Again, same for opening elements that we have here. Then we're going to use the grid for this area, and we're just creating a container for all of it. And then inside of here we have a div label input for the name, and then the email, and then the text area down here, and then finally the button that submits. The second column has the contact info right here, and socials right here, and there you go. So if we save this and we come back up here, we'll see that we have our form, Highlights nice, good accessibility. And there we go. If I get this back to 100%, this is what it looks like. Very, very similar, as you can see, to the actual mockups created in Figma. So let's get this section right here working, this nav, because right now if we click it, nothing happens. So we're going to have a little bit of JavaScript in order to make that work. We also want these icons to light up when you're scrolling too. So there's a little bit of JavaScript that we're going to do for that. So we're going to put script. Source is main.js, which doesn't yet exist. Let's go ahead and create that. Main.js. All right. And inside of main.js, we're going to create a function that will update everything. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and paste this and then describe what's happening. So here's a function called update list. Now this is going to be responsible for when a person's scrolling either with their finger on a phone or a tablet or their mouse in a browser for highlighting the given area or the given dot based on which section it corresponds to. So you can see we're getting the H1 and H2 elements. So why are we getting those? Well, those are all the different that they basically define where each section begins. And so if we can use JavaScript to get the bounding client rect right there dot top, this will give you the information in terms of how far away each of the sections are from the top of a browser. And in doing this and returning this value, we're able to then query selector all or get all of the selected circles, which is the class that's applied to any of the elements with selected circle. And we can iterate through each one of those, and we can remove a class called selected circle. Same thing with our nav dot over here. Our nav dot, this will allow us to add based on the position of, or based on what's returned here, if it's the correct section essentially. So if you've never touched JavaScript, this is going to be a little bit out of your wheelhouse for sure. So if you don't understand it now, don't worry about it. I would definitely say though, if you're interested in this sort of thing, definitely take a JavaScript course. And of course, the function in and of itself, just by declaring it, doesn't do anything, so we have to run it. So we're just going to run update list. And so finally, what we have to do is we have to run or call update list and update it every time a person's scrolling down. So what we do is window.add event listener on scroll. You can do click events and all these other type of events. We're going to open up and just say update list. So we're going to call it. So let's save that. We're going to go back to our project, and here we are. All of that code is responsible for making this happen essentially. Awesome, awesome stuff. So what happens if we actually click on these? They're not working just yet, and that's because we need to make an adjustment. And right here, I forgot to specify on these ones, this has to go to the work section, also the client section, and then finally down here, we'll have hire. And so these right here are corresponding to the IDs that are given to H2 ID work, ID clients, and then also hire right here. So if we save that, now it will smooth scroll to those sections. So work, or maybe we want to go to hire, and there we go. And the same thing will occur if we do it up here as well. All right, so that is the full actual project. And now what we can do is deploy it using Hostinger. So the first thing we want to do is go to github.com, and let's do that right now. I already have an account created. You can create an account as well to get to this point. But what we want to do is create a new repository. All right, this is going to store our website files essentially. So I'm going to call this just personal port, as in portfolio. And then we'll go ahead, and for this, we're going to leave it at public. If you want to make it private, which is recommended, it adds extra steps to this though. You just have to specify a key and all that. But we're going to make it public for this, and we're going to create the repo here. All right, so now it gives you some information in terms of how to initialize this to GitHub based on your project. So there's a few things. You could set this up in desktop, or you can do this in command line. You're going to need Git. So you're going to just type in Google install Git and get to that point where you have it already installed. And so we're just going to use this method here, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's open up our personal portfolio section. I'm going to move this off screen, and you'll see the commands that I'm about to write. So view terminal, we're going to put new terminal, and we're going to type in git init. All right. Then we're going to type in git add period, which means simply all. We're going to then git commit -m. We'll just say first commit. By the way, if you don't understand Git, there's a lot of free courses. It's definitely, in Git and GitHub in general, it's definitely worth knowing, especially if you're somebody who's dealing with code. Branch, we're going to put uppercase M, and I'm just going through all the steps, by the way. Main, and then we're going to copy and paste the rest of it because this is a long command right here. Git remote add origin, and then this URL right there. Of course, yours will be different because you have a different account. And then git push -u origin main. All right, so this is going to upload everything here that we specified right there. So now if we go back and we refresh this, you're going to see all of our files. All right, so that's the first step. And now we have to head on over to hostinger.com. I'm going to go ahead and choose under hosting. We could do shared web hosting for this. You have all the pricing options that you can then make your own decision. I'm just going to choose the this section right here for the premium, and I'm going to leave this just for my purposes, we'll just leave this at a year. The total is $21.48. Now again, you're going to make sure that you enter the coupon code DesignCourse to get your discount applied here. Very important that you do that. And I'm going to go ahead and pause and just fill out all this information. And there we are. So now we're just going to walk through this real quickly. We're going to hit start now. We can select a different platform if we wish, but we know we don't have a platform. We did everything pretty much custom. So we're going to skip. I will start from scratch. And at this point, we have the option I selected gave me a free domain. So I'm just going to enter just a fake domain name. I haven't even thought of it. I'm going to think of it really fast. I'm going to make sure it's something that exists already. So I'm just going to put DesignCourse -hostinger.com. Of course, you'll want to use something like your name if you can get that as a .com or some other extension. So I'm going to hit search. And it tells you it renews in a year or so. We're going to hit continue. Notice how everything is super easy to get this set up. This is all looking good to me for server location, the domain name, and contact information. This is actually an old address for now, so that's fine. I'll just leave that for the time being. And here we go. It's going to set up everything based on your server environment and everything that you just specified. And it should go here pretty quickly, less than 3 minutes. Great, it is done. Definitely less than 3 minutes. We're going to hit manage site right here. All right, so there it goes. It was curious because it said it's not registered it yet. So if we hit preview my website, for instance, it's doing this sort of browser cache checker thing or whatever. Please allow up to 5 seconds. Come on, Cloudflare, rather. Go, 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 go. And there it is. So this is what it will look like. Let's see if we DesignCourse hostinger.com. Right now, it's not yet available, but we do have like this preview right here. All right, and then we're going to scroll down all the way here to the almost the very bottom, and we're going to click on Git. All right, so what we want to do now, if we had a private repository, we would generate an SSH key from here. It would give us the key, we'd copy it, and then we would go over to this section into settings of, assuming this was, again, private, and then we would go to deploy keys and we would add it there. But we're not going to do that. We're going to do just create a new repository here. And what we want to do is paste in the actual GitHub URL to our project. So if we go back just to right here, we're going to copy that. We're going to go back here, and for public repositories, as you can see, it gives you an example. This is exactly what we want. And then the branch here that we have is no longer called master, it's called main. All right, so you're going to want to put main here, change that. And then directory, for the directory, we can just leave that blank. So just go ahead and click create. It's going to load a little bit, and then we're going to have some options. We could deploy it right here, and then we can also set up automatic or auto deployment right here. Now let's just let's set up auto deployment, and it can make our life a little bit easier. So what we'll do is we'll click this on the webhook URL. We're going to go back to our GitHub project. We're going to go to settings, and then we're going to go over to webhooks. So we're going to add a webhook, and we're going to copy in this area right here, or paste rather, that deploy key that we set up, or the webhook URL rather, sorry. We're going to leave content type as what it is by default, and we're going to leave secret empty, and just the push event is what we want, and then add webhook right here. All right, so it should tell you it was successfully created. We send a ping payload to test it out, etc., etc., etc. Now, if we click on preview my website right here, there it is. It is automatically pulled from GitHub, and it's going to function exactly as we intended. And of course, if we want to make a change to this, like for instance, let us change maybe this button, view my work instead, and you make an update to your site for whatever reason, we can come over here and find our button, view my work. All right, we'll save that, and we'll go ahead to git add, and we only changed the index.html, so we're going to do that. Git commit -m. I updated CTA, or call to action, and git push. All right, so now with the automatic deployment, if we go back to our site here, this should now have updated to view my work. So it's an automatic deployment. Every time you push to GitHub, GitHub will then send a ping essentially to Hostinger, which will then download the updates and automatically deploy them to your website. Awesome, awesome stuff. All right, everybody, hopefully you enjoyed that. I know it was a bit lengthy, but hopefully now you have some confidence in terms of both what it means to create a really solid portfolio, whether you're a designer or a developer of some sort, and also how to deploy a project with automatic GitHub deployment. And so I definitely check out the top link of this YouTube description, which is the sponsor of this video, Hostinger.com. They're a really solid host, and obviously with excellent pricing. And as you've seen during the sign-up process, it is very smooth, very user-friendly, and easy to use. All right, everybody, I will see you next time. All right, goodbye.